There are few people today who can talk to the strengths and challenges of the European Union better than José Manuel Barroso. Serving as Prime Minister of Portugal, Barroso then went on to become the President of the European Commission. The man believes in the power and importance of the European Union and the necessity of our global institutions at a time when trust in those very same institutions seems to be at an all-time low. In recent years, President Barroso has taken on a senior role at Goldman Sachs and is the chair of Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. In this iteration of the Swift Hour, we talk about Vladimir Putin, the future of Great Britain and its relationship with the EU, and the future of US-EU relations, while we also consistently discuss the importance and critical value of our institutions. Mr. President, it is great to see you again back in person at the annual Concordia Summit.
Matthew, it's my pleasure to be with you.
You just wrapped up a conversation talking a bit about Vladimir Putin and Russia. This is the first time since World War II that a war has emerged on the European continent. Where do you see things going next in this battle?
I'm very worried and very concerned because I think, frankly, no one really knows what is the end game, if I may use that expression. I think we are going to be there for the long term. Stalemate will be, from my point of view, the most likely scenario in the foreseeable future. I know Putin. I met him many times. In fact, during the time I was in the European Union, it was the non-European Union leader that I met the most, according to my cabinet, 25 times. Because at that time we had twice a year a summit with Russia and also met him in the bilateral meetings back-to-back with the G8 and the G20. At that time, Russia was member of the G8. And I don't see how Putin can accept a defeat. That's my concern here. At the same time, of course, we should and we continue to support fully Ukraine. But Putin does not accept the very idea of an independent Ukraine. Emotionally, intellectually, politically. I remember some discussions I had with him. One of them, he told me that Ukraine was an artificial creation by the CIA and the European Commission. I told him, look, if it was the European Commission, I should have known. And Putin is a product of resentment. He has a deep resentment about what he feels as the humiliation of Russia after the end of Cold War. So I think that it's going to be very difficult to find, even if there is some kind of ceasefire, to find a true reconciliation between Russia and Ukraine. So it's better that we prepare for the long term, a conflict with Russia. And of course, this is, I believe, negative for overall stability in Europe and also in the world.
Are you surprised at how things have played out? Are you surprised by some of the weaknesses of the Russian military that have been showcased?
Yeah, to some extent, yes. But I believe he has invested a lot, for instance, in nuclear capabilities. So during all these years. But in fact, in terms of the morale of the troops, that's quite clear. They are not having the morale they should, we could expect. And there have been a lot of mistakes from a military point of view. I'm not a military expert. I don't want to comment on that, but I believe it was a failure of Putin, in terms of his estimations of what could happen. I think it was a strategic mistake also for him and for Russia. Having said that, what is important to note is the remarkable reaction, first of all, of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian state, but also of the West, the United States and Europe and NATO. We have been extremely supportive, and this is really positive, I believe, for those who said that the West was doomed to fail. That was, and probably that was one of the mistakes of Putin, because after Syria he thought he was stronger, and after Afghanistan he thought the US and the West were weaker. So he made a miscalculation. But we are showing that it is possible for the West to be strong if there is really a political will and political leadership.
Do you see a shift? There's been, obviously, between the Trump administration here in the US and then now to the Biden administration, two very different approaches to the EU, two very different approaches to NATO. But do you see the relationship strengthening?
Yes, it's strong now. I'm an Atlanticist. I believe that I'm a committed European, but at the same time I believe that we need the United States and Europe to be even closer. I think it's quite, those of us who want open societies and open economies in this very dangerous and predictable world, we need some higher level of complicity. Unfortunately, during some time, there was not that trust between the United States and the European Union. Now it's working well. And I hope it will not be only between the current administration and the leadership in the European Union and the most European countries, but also that will be structural. That will be the American system, bipartisan, because it should be a bipartisan, if I may say so, goal to have this strong system of allies for the United States. And at the same time for Europe also, it is in our most important strategic interest to have the United States as a reliable, consistent strategic partner. And so I hope that will continue this kind of current interaction that I know it's very good.
But I think if you were to talk to politicians in the United States today, they would say Europe has put themselves in such a vulnerable position from an energy standpoint, especially, and that there isn't as much of that strong alliance as there should be.
Yeah, it's true what about energy, because that was some countries of Europe, because some others were not in that position. There were those mistakes, by complacency, sometimes by complicity, towards Russia. But basically now we are seeing a very strong reaction. Let's be fair. Germany, for instance, is making a complete change. Now they are committed to spend more than 2% of GDP in defense, which means that Germany will have the biggest army in Europe, bigger than France, but also bigger than UK or bigger than Turkey, because 2% of GDP of Germany is a lot of money, I can tell you. Mm-hmm. And they are going to invest it, I think, in European capabilities. So we need this complicity and convergence between European countries and the United States and the European Union as such also, and the US. But of course, not always. There were the best decisions on both sides.
How do you see the future of US politics? I think I used to be one of those that traveling all around the world for Concordia. You travel more than 200 days a year for all of your different activities from both a business and global affairs perspective. There are so many things that have happened in the last couple of years here that I'd said that would never happen here.
What will never happen?
For instance, the vitriol of politics today, how people talk to one another. At your core, you are a man of politics. That's your background. Look, how do you see civility today, deference today? Does it concern you?
To be very honest, and I've been living 4 years in the United States. I was at Georgetown and at Princeton University. So I know a little bit about the United States, and I like and I love the United States. And I'm deeply concerned, as a friend of the United States, by the level of hostility I see in the political spectrum. Of course I understand there are differences between Republicans and Democrats as we are. I was Prime Minister of my country, I was leader of the opposition. But for instance, I was leader of the opposition against Guterres, who is now he was then Prime Minister, is now the Secretary General
of the UN.
But then I supported him becoming Secretary General of the UN. I called some of my friends who were not supporting him, because when it comes to the national interest, we are together. And unfortunately, I have seen not always that in the United States. I think the level of polarization in American politics today is unprecedented, at least as far as I remember. I don't go as far as the Civil War, but as far as we remember, this generation remember, this is the worst moment in terms of political polarization in the United States. And this is a problem because also from an international point of view, if you think about the consistency over time, what you had, for instance, George W. Bush. I worked with George W. Bush a lot. I was Prime Minister then. But then we had President Obama that was almost the opposite of Bush. Then we had President Trump, who is almost the opposite of Obama. Then Biden, the opposite of Trump. And who's going to be next, you see? So over time, there is a perception, sometimes it's an exaggeration, because in some very important issues, the United States keep strategic the same position. But in some others, there is a big change. Attitudes towards the European Union have changed completely over time. Attitudes towards trade, towards some other issues, including, for instance, North Korea or even Iran. There have been changes that are very dramatic for a country like the United States that is still, in spite of all the difficulties, the leading global country. And from a Western perspective, we need some stability, some consistency and coherence over time. So this is why, as a true friend of the United States, sometimes I feel concerned about the level of polarization that I believe it's too high in internal politics, and that sometimes has consequences in external relations.
But so much of it also comes back to this continuing decrease and lack of institutional trust. Yeah. Not just that you see in the United States, but that you see all around the world.
Exactly.
And institutional trust seems to be at an all-time low, right?
Yes. Partly because of some developments, like for instance, social media. Nowadays, it's almost a paradox, but now you have overall a higher level of education in the population than we had before. But also, before the communication was very much elite-driven, so there were some things that could not be said in public. There was a grammar of acceptability that was rejecting some points to be made explicit. Today, because of social media and with the benefit sometimes of anonymous commentary, you can say anything. And this is feeding also resentment and sometimes hate speeches. And so it's much more difficult to navigate the media space. That is, of course, the public space. And you are right. So there are more challenges to civility, to more decent societies. And I agree with you. It's all over the world. And we have that also in our democracies. We believe, and I continue to believe, that democracies are superior as a system to any alternative. But at the same time, I'm concerned with the problems that this level of communication can bring to the confidence, the overall trust, and the institutional investment in our societies.
But you have, I think it's such an interesting to reflect, and I'd love your reflections on this, because I imagine you met her on a number of occasions, but this morning was the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, and you think to her first audience with Winston Churchill, her first meeting with U.S. President Eisenhower, to what she's seen over the last 70 years, and how much the world has changed, and how different things are today. Reflect a little bit on her passing, what it means for the world.
Look, I had the privilege of meeting Queen Elizabeth II several times. In fact, one day I was foreign minister, and there was a state visit of the Portuguese Federal Republic, and we stayed 3 days in Buckingham Palace. And I was with her in the official state dinner in Buckingham. She came the day afterwards to the official dinner in our embassy in London. And by the way, I was sitting right hand to her during the dinner, so we spoke for about many issues. And in other occasions, as Commission President, in summits of the European Union and G20 in the United Kingdom. So I had that honor to meet her several times. And in fact, she has seen so much. Now, when you think about the last 70 years, I will not say the world is in a worse position than it was before. I think basically we are in a better position.
But so much has changed.
Yes, yeah. But change, some things for the better, some things for the worse. But if you look at the overall levels of, let's say, health, education, child mortality is going down, life expectancy is going up, and even in terms of freedom around the world, we are better now than 70 years ago. You remember after the Soviet Union, Europe called the Iron Curtain. So I'm not one of those pessimistic, but in fact, as you said, so many change. And what was remarkable about Queen Elizabeth was that she was going through all this change and keeping some ideas of permanence. And by the way, that is something that monarchy allows if properly managed. And I believe that's important, also from an historic point of view, that we have this position of respect for history, and that we understand that the world existed before we were born, because some politicians believe the world was born with them, and there is some egocentrism and kind of, no. We have to have a respect for institutions. And I believe that was one of the lessons of the great, let's say, reign of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth.
Well, Mr. President, it's great to see you. And actually, before we wrap up, talk a little bit about what this annual summit means, Concordia. You're on its leadership council.
Yeah, I think Concordia is doing a great job, and by the way, congratulations to you. I think it's now a very important gathering here in New York every year. Unfortunately, for some time we could not because of COVID, but it's great to be back in person, and also other activities that you are doing all over the world, namely in the Americas, including South America, but also now, hopefully, in Europe. And it's important that we can have this convening power, putting people from the politics, from business, from the academia, for the media, from science, technology, to think together and try to make this world a better place. And I think you, as Concordia, provide that platform, and I want to congratulate you, and also I'm delighted to be part, to some extent, of this project.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to
Thank
see you.
My pleasure.